Carolyn and I have a mentor couple, Peter and Ida Angier. And they were missionaries in Lebanon for several years. And then they were back, and Peter was a missions pastor at Hollywood Presbyterian Church and an ordained pastor for many years. Ida led a women's Bible study, and Carolyn was in that. So they have had a great influence on us. And Peter wants to live his life very down to earth, have God involved in daily things of his life. And so Peter would pray for parking spaces. So, being in Hollywood, there's never a parking spot when you need one. And he would pray for parking spaces, and he got them, which was amazing. And I don't know how big a baseball fan he was, but he went to a Dodger game, Dodger Stadium, and he prayed to catch a foul ball. He caught 4. Personally, if I had that kind of prayer power, I would focus it on a few other things. But so I love that, and I love those stories about Peter. And he wanted to have a simple dependence on God, and to depend on God for daily bread. And we talked last week about the need to depend on God. And we said it was so important that we were going to spend this whole message talking about that. And one of the questions I have is praying for parking. It's a fantastic way to keep the image of God before us, to be aware of God in our lives. But is it dependence on God? Is it the kind of thing that we need in our life in order to depend on God? So we're going to go back to last week's text, which is in Lamentations. And before we read it, I want to just tell you a little bit about the author. Jeremiah is the author of Lamentations. Some of us know Jeremiah, if we know the Old Testament, because he wrote the book of Jeremiah. So, okay, that's that guy. And Jeremiah wrote about what was going on in his life and his world. And then that's in the book of Jeremiah. And then in the book of Lamentations, he writes these gorgeous words, these fabulous words. Some of this is very familiar to some of us. Some of us have memorized this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh every morning. Oh, that sounds so good. And many of us, we cling to that, and we remind ourselves of that. And as we read what comes next, our text for today, I just want you to imagine Jeremiah, that these sentiments of him sound like someone who has he is satisfied. Oh, life is good. And maybe he's sitting on his porch, his back deck, as the sun is setting, and he's got a cup of coffee or glass of iced tea. Maybe he's got some friends, and he's just reflecting on the goodness of life. And he says this in Lamentations 3:25 to 27. The Lord is good to those who depend on him, to those who search for him. So it's good to wait quietly for salvation from the Lord. And it's good for people to submit at an early age to the yoke of his discipline. Doesn't that just feel like maybe somebody who's, they've learned, they've grown, they're reflecting on life, and life is good. And I would say that all of us could share that sentiment, those same kinds. Oh, it's good. God's good to those who depend on him. If we were sitting on the beach, under an umbrella, glass of iced tea in our hand, all of us could just yeah, Jeremiah, that's right, that's good. But the reality in Jeremiah's life could not be further from the truth. And rabbis called Jeremiah the weeping prophet. It says that he was born wailing and he never stopped. He's just irritating that he's so lamentating. And he wept because he lived through, he experienced, proclaimed to the people of God the devastation that would come because they didn't trust in him, because they didn't turn their life, because they didn't depend on him. And his book of Jeremiah is written to describe the last desperate days of the Jerusalem that he loved. And then in Lamentations, he expresses the cries of the survivors. Lamentations is about what happened, or Jeremiah is about what happened, and Lamentations is about how we feel about it. And it gives voice to the deepest agonies, the hope that some comfort could come from crying out to the Lord for mercy. And so the first thing that we learn from this weeping prophet is this: have confidence in the Lord. Have confidence in the Lord. Listen to that first verse again. The Lord is good to those who depend on him, to those who search for him. I want you to change that thought that I gave you. Instead of sitting on a beach under an umbrella with a glass of iced tea, Jeremiah was sitting in rubble, holding on to a rag that had been some loved one's shirt. And he is desperately clinging to this truth that he knows to be true, but it's very hard to believe, that the Lord is good to those who depend on him. See, the king of Israel had unwisely sided with another country against Babylon. So he had made an agreement with a king of another country against the king of Babylon, and Babylon won the battle, won the war. And the king of Babylon brought his army into Jerusalem, took over and leveled it. The entire city of Jerusalem razed to the ground, no stone on top of another. And he took the people off to Babylon as slaves, many never to return. But before he did that, just to make his point, he dragged the king of Israel out onto the plain, brought his two sons out, killed them before his eyes, and then gouged out his eyes, so that the last thing he ever saw was the death of his only two sons, and then took him to Babylon. Whew. That is the world that Jeremiah was describing. And then he's sitting, trying to understand who this God is. How can we depend on him? So here's a question for you. Do you currently have, or have you ever had, circumstances in your life that you're pretty sure are not going to change? Pretty sure, even if you depend on God, they're not changing. They are what they are. Some of us have medical conditions, family members, job situations. We'd like for them to change. We'd like for God to do something miraculous. But if it isn't miraculous, things aren't going to change. Here's what we learned from Jeremiah. Confidence in the Lord, confidence for Jeremiah was not about depending on God to change his circumstances. It was depending on God in the midst of his circumstances. He was writing the book of Lamentations after everything bad had already happened. The people were gone, the land was destroyed, and so here's the image for me. Jeremiah's in free fall. It looks like this. Just, everything's gone. It's everything. It's the rug has been pulled out from under him, and he's in free fall. And you ask what questions might you ask about this picture? Well, is there a plane involved? A tall building off of which he's fallen? We all hope there's a net down there for this fellow. Here's a little thing. There's nothing wrong with praying for parking spaces or foul balls. But if that is the worst you have in your life's pretty good. Most of us have bigger challenges. Most of us face things that our circumstances aren't going to change. Where is God in the midst of that? How do you trust? How do you depend on? How do you have confidence in a God in the midst of the challenges? Because bad news, God is not a genie. We don't get to rub a lamp and everything changes and gets better. So it's in the midst of the challenges. So let me show you the rest of the picture, which gives us a little bit more hope. This is actually the picture. This man isn't falling straight down. He's moving towards someone else. There's intentionality. As long as we're just the one on the right, we are falling. But when the one on the left shows up, oh, that there's intention, there's purpose, there's something going on. There's more than free fall. There is forward motion. This is confidence in God, that He is there, that He is meeting us in the midst of our circumstances, that His arms are reached out, His hands are ready to hold us, to bring us to the next point. We are not in free fall. We are in a forward motion towards God. It's the person on the left that makes us a fun picture instead of a horrible one of unity and harmony and quick second timing and coordination. Confidence in the Lord means to have an awareness of God's presence that gives us forward progress, even as some of our parts of our life feel like they're in free fall. So let me tell you the story of Jill, a friend of mine from another church. She started going to an orphanage in Kenya, and she went year after year. Some of us in this church have gone to some of the mission opportunities that this church has, and we go, and we've gone multiple times, and we've gotten to know people, and we've felt, a connection, a bond, a family experience with them somewhere over in another part of the world. That's what happened with Jill in Kenya in an orphanage. And she went and spent several days there reconnecting with her family, these children, some who had grown up from children into teenagers, met some of the new ones who had come in, and was loving on them and doing the things that you do. And then some of the kids got her off to the side when they could talk to her privately, and they told her of the devastation. The man leading the orphanage was abusing the kids, sexually abusing them. And you can imagine the floor fell out from Jill, because imagine you're in her shoes. What can you do? You're going home to America in a few days. What can you possibly do for these people, these children that you love, that you have entrusted to God's care? Well, she got moving, and she did get the man removed, and she got the church involved there, and things began to move. But on the plane ride home, she was a bit like Jeremiah with that rag in her hand. She had a doll that one of the little kids had made, and she just held it, and it was as if she was sitting in the rubble of her hopes and dreams for that orphanage and wondering, what am I supposed to do? How am I to have confidence in God in the midst of my free fall of this, and theirs as well? And so she began to prepare, and she spent a year in Kenya recovering that place, becoming in charge of it, and reestablishing it, and all of those sorts of things. Now imagine what that required of her. That's the kind of thing where she had to get her things in order. She had to arrange for her own job here, get time off, get her place sold or rented, her car, all kinds of things. And of course it changed her life, but it also fulfilled it. The interesting thing about situations like that, well, let me go on and say something else. Our situations are seldom so stark, right, as that. Where sometimes if we think to ourselves, I'm not praying for God to work in my life because I don't want to go to Kenya. The old thing, don't pray for God to send you somewhere in the world because He'll send you the place you don't like the most. Jill didn't hate the thought of going. She was desperate to go. It fulfilled her life. And so let me just ask you to think of one question for this week. This next step. This week, ask the Lord, what would forward progress look like for me? See, no one's inviting you to take over an orphanage in Kenya. Who knows? I don't know what your life is, what that free fall looks like in your life. But in that circumstance, in your situation, this week you could ask the Lord, what would forward progress look like for me. Jill's heart was broken, and she was focused, and she was busy arranging all of her affairs. But here's the thing. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't racing around trying to solve all the problems by herself. She practiced the second thing that Jeremiah teaches us, and it's this: wait quietly for help. Wait quietly for help. It says, so it is good to wait quietly for the salvation from the Lord. The Hebrew word that's translated salvation is translated in other places as help, victory, deliverance. And so Jeremiah is saying help, deliverance, victory, salvation. It's good to wait quietly for it. Thanks, Jeremiah. In the first verse, you say, look for forward progress. And in the second verse, you say, sit quietly. Which is it? Which one are we to do? Both. We want to look for where God is leading us, but we don't want to have to be frantic about it. It isn't just up to us. We can wait quietly. I love Psalm 39. It kind of reflects this. It says, I remained utterly silent, not even saying anything good. But listen to the rest. But my anguish increased. I kind of hate that the Bible is so authentic and so real that it tells us the way it is, but it is the way it is, and so I guess I'm grateful that the Bible admits it. Because sitting quietly and not trying to solve the problems that we can't fix ourselves, it causes us anguish. It's hard to wait quietly. But my own life, I had a business situation, a conflict, a misunderstanding that was going to cost me a lot of money. And there was a friend of mine who was involved in the situation tangentially, and he had a lot of authority, a lot of influence, a lot of business sense, and I could have gone to him and said, help me fix this, and he could have. But even as I thought about it, I thought, that's not really very clean. That's dragging him into my stuff. That's trying for me to solve the problem when really I should wait and see what God wants to do in this situation. But I'll be honest with you, I'd have done it in a heartbeat. I'd have still gone to him if my wife hadn't said, you better not. She said, listen, that is not the right step for you. You need to wait quietly and for the Lord's help, not for his. Okay, so I said, okay. But what if he brings it up? If he brings it up, can then I ask him about it? And she's like, okay, fine. Well, he and I were walking once a week. And for 45 minutes each week for the next 3 weeks, I'm walking alongside of him. He's talking about whatever he's talking about. And in my head, I'm going, Lord, let him bring it up. Let him bring it up. Let him bring it up. I was so anxious. There's none of this. I was quiet. And I was waiting. But man, I was like, come on, bring it up. And on the third week, he's talking about this and he's talking about that. And he would ask me about what was going on in my life. And he brought something up. It was related. He didn't say, so tell me about this. He said, hey, how's this going? And I'm like, that could be it. And I'm like, Lord, was that it? Did he bring it up? Can I talk to him about it? What? And he went, or this. And he kept going. And on he went to the next topic. I'm like, I never brought it up. He never helped me fix it. Things happened, whatever. But I will tell you this. Many times I put it into the Lord's hands. And then I took it back. And then I did it again. And then I took it back. Right? Isn't that how we are? And yet what Jeremiah, in the midst of his challenges, said, so it's good to wait quietly for the help, for the salvation from the Lord. Now, I want to say something about waiting quietly. I do not want you to hear that you shouldn't bring things up. For too long, probably in our country, but certainly in the church, we have told people to sit down and be quiet. And I have 2 daughters that would not let me come home if I left you with the thought that the preacher's telling you, you know what, we just need to be quiet and let things happen. That is not the way things work. And especially for women and minorities and people in vulnerable places, that is not Jeremiah, that is not the Bible, and that's not my word to you. Just sit down and be quiet. But in our own lives, what would it mean to wait quietly for help? So this week, here's the next step for you. Consider one area of your life in which you put great emotional energy. What would it look like to wait quietly for help in that area for you? For me, it was don't bring it up. What is one thing you could do or stop doing that would help you worry less and wait more? What's one thing you could do to help you worry less and wait more? You know, each one of these next steps, they're just intended to help us move forward in what we're trying to learn from the Lord. The point of that text and of my experience with my friend is to have an attitude of allowing the Lord to save us. We do our best to try to save ourselves. But we need to look for Him to save, to help, to bring victory, and to not take it into our own hands. And when we do that, something else is going to happen. There's things we need to learn. And so the third thing we learn from Jeremiah is yield to new training. Yield to new training. It says, and it is good for people to submit at an early age to the yoke of his discipline. The yoke of his discipline, what does that mean? Well, we've all done it as adults. We have submitted to the yoke of someone else's discipline. If you want to be good at a sport, or an instrument, or a policeman, or a firefighter, any of those things, in the military, we submit to the yoke, the direction, the instruction, the training of someone else's discipline. It's not ours. We haven't learned it yet, but they know this is what you have to do in order to become who you want to be. And so I had a personal trainer. I don't know if you can tell that, but I had a personal trainer, and when I was working with him, oh my gosh, he knew what to do. And he had me doing curls and whatever these are called, and what I loved about him was it was his yoke. I just needed to do what he told me to do. You know, when you're doing exercises on your own, you're always like 1, 2, 3, and you're going to get to 10. We never counted. I never knew how many I did. That wasn't important to him. He pushed me until I ran out of gas, and then he'd go, "Oh, are you kidding me?" Well, I learned quick not to ask that. So, but he knew I had 3 more in me. They were the hardest 3, but I had submitted to the yoke of his discipline. Whatever he said, I pushed through. We were connected and yoked. Why? Because I trusted in his knowledge, his experience. It's absolutely good for people to submit to the Lord when they're young. But guess what? It's good to submit to the Lord's discipline no matter how old we are. But I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. It's easier when you're young. It's not so easy for us. We're going to have to work harder at it. And there's a great description of why that's the case. It's called situational self-leadership. And it's so helpful for me that I'm going to walk you through it quickly. So there are 4 steps in anything you're going to learn, anything. From making bread to exercise to leading a church, you're going to go through these 4 steps. D1, the enthusiastic beginner. So let's just take an example. Against our better judgment, we gave our teenager, not me, somebody, us, this is the us story. We gave our child a skateboard for Christmas, right? They wanted it. Oh, they couldn't wait. Everybody had it. They were watching Tony Hawk on video, and oh my gosh, they got to have it. So they open the package, and it's a skateboard. Yes, it's the perfect one. It's the right skates. You were listening. This is awesome. Well, you're going to open something else? No, I'm out. I'm going. And off they take out into the street. You can almost time it. About 10 minutes later, they have moved from an enthusiastic beginner with low competence but high commitment to a D2, which is disillusioned learner, right? They're all beat up. They're scraped up. That new skateboard already has scrapes on it, and they are low competence and low commitment. What do they say? Take it back. This thing sucks. This is crazy. I don't want to do this, right? We get there very quickly. The problem with this is that D1 lasts so short. We move quickly to D2, where we're like, oh, this is hard. Anybody ever try to learn ballroom dancing or tennis? It's like, oh, I could do this. Oh, this is hard. We move to this is hard right away. And we live in this disillusioned learner stage. But if we keep at it, I know you've experienced this. We're all a D4 at something. So you have gone through this process, and you've gotten to this capable but cautious place as a D3. This is someone who has moderate to high competence, variable commitment. So what that means is that that skateboarder now is going to a tournament because he or she's just gotten really good. But they call their friend who's been helping him, says, would you come with me? I just kind of want you to be there and watch me because I'm not sure about the, whatever the trick is, and it would really help me for you to be there. So they're competent, but they're not quite sure of themselves. And then you get to D4. D4 are the people right? I'm good. Story of D4. Ken Blanchard, I've mentioned him. He has a friend named Mark McVeigh. Mark sings. And so Ken wanted him to come and sing at a concert, and he wanted the whole church to come, and he wanted us to advertise it and promote it, and no one had ever heard of this guy. And we said, really? So Mark McVeigh, we're going to, okay, Ken, but, is he good? And he said, Mark can sing. And we're like, okay. Mark McVeigh was Jean Valjean in Les Mis on Broadway 3,200 times. The man can sing. He's a D4. He goes around the country singing and then doing workshops and training and teaching. And it was awesome. I sat with him at places where he was going to be singing. He's like, yeah, how's it going? Yeah, sure, okay. And then, we're chatting. And then he stood up and he sang for President George W. Bush in his library, and he sang patriotic songs, and it was like there were fireworks going off. It was like, and then he got back down, and he's like, yeah, so what? How's things? It's like, are you kidding me? On the way home, we were in Dallas. That's where the library is. As we were driving on the bus back to our hotel, there was a place with a neon sign that said karaoke. I said, please let us go over there and have this man sing Proud to Be, an American. I mean, it'll be free drinks all around. Come on. It was unbelievable. That's a D4. You are a D4 at something. But let me explain why did I bring this up? Because we D4s hate to be D1s. Ugh. I don't want to do that. My wife wanted to learn ballroom dancing. I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to look stupid. Yeah, you will. There's no help for it. But we have to move through this process. So here's what happens as adult Christians. I don't know how to pray out. I don't know how to pray in public. I don't want to do that. I don't do that. I do a lot, but I don't pray in public. Oh, okay. How about judging others? How are you at not judge not? Not so good. How about, whatever it is, pray, fast, all these kinds of things. That's not for me. It's not for you. You're just a D2. We have to grow, but we stay in our sweet spots. I'm actually very comfortable up here. Invite me to preach, I'm in. Invite me to teach the teenagers. Sorry, I don't know. Something. I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable. I'm a D4 at this. Find somebody else. So here's the next step for us. This week, identify one spiritually related practice that you are a beginner at. and commit to becoming more proficient. So, for example, how about this? Giving others your undivided attention. That's probably going to mean turning some things off and putting them in your pocket. Undivided attention. Praying for someone immediately when they share a concern. Out on the patio, hey, pray for me, I'm having surgery. Let's pray right now. Really? Yeah. Not judging others. These are things we're not good at, but we will get better at if we move along. So this is that bit about needing to yield to new training. It's good for people to submit at an early age to the yoke of his discipline. So I'll just give you an example of me doing that, just to wrap up. I lost my job. I wasn't good at it, and they found out. So I knew, but they found out. So I lost my job, and I could have spent the next few weeks stressing and wrestling and but we had already had plans to go to Canada. So I said, you know what? Let's just go. So we went, and Carolyn and the girls, they went around and did things. I sat by a river and listened to tapes and read and poured myself into learning a new direction. Where am I, God? Where am I to go? What am I to do? And let me tell you, sitting by a river, listening to tapes when you've lost your job is nothing like sitting in an umbrella under an umbrella with an iced tea at the beach. I mean, it was rough. What am I going to do? My ego's destroyed. I can't take care of my family. Some of you have been there, but it was waiting quietly. It was yielding to new training. Ultimately, it was confidence in the Lord in the midst of the challenge. It turned my life in a new direction. I'm here today because of that river and that experience by it. So let's not wait for free fall, and let's instead learn, hey, nobody wants to go through what Israel and Jeremiah went through, but since they went through it, let's learn from it, to have confidence in the Lord, to wait quietly for his help, to yield to new training. And we may just get through life, and every once in a while, we will get that iced tea.